Hello everyone, welcome to UMD Media. We are live on both YouTube and Facebook with a new show that is starting today, Sustainability Insights. It starts just now. Welcome again. Today, the first guest for this show, the Sustainability Insights, our new show that we'll be talking about with different guests on urban, national, global sustainability issues with experts, professionals. It's a great pleasure to have my first guest ever for this show, Professor Ronald Wennersten. Actually, I have to disclose that Ronald was my boss, my colleague, my mentor when I was in Europe. So, Ronald, welcome to UMD Media's new Sustainability Insights show.
Thank you.
Great. So I will just give our audience some ideas on where you come from and that. So currently, Professor Ronald is a full professor in architecture and internationalization demonstration school with a background in theoretical physics, chemical engineering. I think it's worth asking how Ronald ended up interested and working in urban studies and buildings and architecture. Before that, or parallel to that, he's also professor at Institute for Advanced Technology in Shandong University, another university in China, one of the biggest, and as well chair in industrial ecology, chair professor. And where he was my boss and my colleague, all that was at KTH. This is the largest and oldest engineering university in Sweden, in Stockholm, the Royal Institute of Technology. Many people actually from different countries go there. And he was also the lead developer for Swedish Institute for Sustainable Urban Development. Therefore, Ronald is well positioned with a lot of experience in urban development, research, all that. So maybe the first question I was hinting was, Ronald, how is it to be working from, theoretical physicist to chemical engineer, but ending up working in architecture school and so on? What does it look like?
I think why I came to this architecture school is that they are putting now more focus on science and resource use in urban development. Traditionally, architects are very much focusing on design of architecture buildings and so on, and they are not really used to the traditional scientific approach. They are more, I would say, into the field of art and design. But the university have decided that they should put more focus on resource use and also on scientific issues. So that's why I also give a course for PhD students in research methodology. This is something very new for most of the architecture students, to use theoretical research methods, evidence-based research, and writing scientific papers in international journals. This is something new for them. And this is my central issue at the university: try to develop the evidence-based scientific approach and also then apply it to to resource use in urban development.
Mm, mm. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? In terms of resource efficiency, the amount of resource that's being mobilized for new construction, all that in China or in other similar countries is huge, right?
Hmm. Absolutely, especially in China, the resource use both in materials and in energy is enormous and is affecting the whole world. And this is partly why I chose to go to China, because I felt that what I was doing in Sweden, it doesn't mean so much. And the Swedish perspectives, I think, on these issues are quite national.
Mm,
And I find it sometimes difficult to discuss with researchers in Sweden now this global aspect, because they
mm,
are so focused on Sweden.
mm,
And Sweden is, I mean, the resource and energy use in Sweden is so little compared to the global situation. So this is why I started to work in China also.
yeah, I think the scale, I mean, if there is any even small marginal incremental change in China, given the scale, I think it would be more meaningful than what you could do with a large change within Sweden or other countries. I agree with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting to compare. I think to compare the situation in China and Sweden when it comes to the focus on sustainability issues.
Mm,
Uh, it's very different. Uh, I mean, it's obvious that China has a focus. If we talk about sustainability uh, aspects, they have a focus on social development and economic development. And the environmental aspects, including then climate change, has a much lower priority.
mhm,
And it's of course because this is a centrally controlled country, so everything is decided top down,
mm,
and all the energy companies are state owned. So the government in China decides through different plans what should be done,
mm,
and of course, they have to in some way continue the economic growth and social. This is why they can continue to be a one party state, because as long as they give the people
mm,
development, they have some kind of recognition for this.
mm,
The situation in Sweden is very different then, but it's also interesting then to see what happens now in Sweden, because the focus in Sweden has been to very much climate change.
mm,
And so Sweden have extremely advanced plans to reduce fossil fuels. We have a target to have no net emissions of greenhouse gases 2045, and we
mm,
have a target to reduce um, transport emissions by 70% by 2030. This is very advanced even from European perspectives.
mm,
But what is happening now is that reality is getting closer to these things, because it starts to affect people. It affects social economic perspectives. The energy prices are going up, and there are a lot of protests towards new wind power plants. So we can see now that these plants are affecting people socially and economic, and this has changed the political situation. We have a Green Party which was in government together with Social Democrats up till only a month ago, but then the Green Party left, and they are very much marginalized now. If you look at the opinion polls, the Green Party will probably not come into the parliament the next, because they have driven these climate change issues so much, so people are feeling that it's affecting the social and economic development too much. It's becoming too costly.
Mm,
And
mm,
this is I mean, these are extremes when you compare with China now,
mm,
because they are totally focused on social economic development, and they control everything. And Sweden is a democracy, so but it's obvious that the Green Party have lost so much because they have focused so much on this climate change issue.
mm,
And
mm.
I think it's an interesting development.
It is indeed. Actually, the two, like you said, the comparison between the two is a reverse of what the priority is. And but I mean, talking about evidence-based research and all that methodology that you are teaching,
Mm.
if you were to, let's say, advise both the Swedish government and the Chinese government, what would be, how do we, because always, even in my area, in my research area, we talk about, triple bottom line sustainability. And the challenge would be, okay, how do you have a technology or a developmental strategy, but how do you pin it down into this space where you are good environmentally, or I mean, if you look at the bigger picture, like planetary boundary. So how do you remain within the planetary boundary, but also
Mm.
at the same time meeting socially and economically viable?
I
Um,
think one has to take a step back then and try to understand my opinion when I work in China, and I can see that, is that phasing out fossil fuels will take longer times than we anticipate. I think it's a lot of wishful thinking about phasing out fossil fuels. And I think it's a dangerous situation we have come into with all these alarms, that including the planetary boundaries, because the planetary boundaries is a very much a theoretical framework. It's not it's not really based on scientific evidence. It's just a theoretical framework. But the problem, I think, with these alarms around this fast degradation of the planet is dangerous. So there is a risk now that more and more these groups will get more and more extremism, because they say they cannot see that things are happening. So it will be more and more violent, I think, around this, uh, like Extinction Rebellion and all these groups now. So I think it's a little bit dangerous with these alarms that we only have 10 years or things left to change. Because my opinion is, when I see especially the development in China and India, is that phasing out fossil fuels will take longer time. And I think that is the basic also focus we have to have when we try to change. And based on my experience from China, it's very difficult to change the central ideas in China. What we try to do is to work with case studies on the local level, and then we use also different kind of experiences and methods from Sweden. How can we create transitions on certain time scale on the local level to show maybe demonstration cases? We
mm,
have to be very practical and focus on practical cases. It's not, I don't think we should just use different general ideas, but we have to look at every case and see how can we create transitions when it comes to energy and use of resources. And of course, these are connected. uh, Energy and material use is connected. So and we have to use energy in a more efficient way. And sometimes when I talk about energy consumption, you know that also, that I get protests from engineers. They say you cannot consume energy.
mm,
But what we consume in energy is of course we can consume. We can consume food, but what happens is that we consume high quality and leave low quality. So
yeah.
energy consumption is to try, we actually consume high quality energy and we leave low quality energy behind. And I
Mm,
think this is a process we have to look carefully at in these cases. How can we increase the energy efficiency in all sectors in these cases and use energy more effective? It's very much about that, not so much energy production, I think. In this.
mm. Yeah, one thing that you kind of alluded to is the uh, finding a way that fits every specific situation, not one size fits all approach. So
Mm,
I remember there was, I think, back in 2004, I was in Casablanca and we were discussing sustainable consumption in Africa,
mm,
and there was a guy from UN who came from New York, and he was talking about as if sustainable consumption is about reducing consumption. So I
mm.
had to protest somehow, saying that for example, in many countries in Africa, sustainable consumption, if any, is about increasing consumption, because there are millions of people who don't have basic needs meet and met, all that and so on. So but there is this one notion that should work everywhere, anytime and so on.
Yeah, and also this idea about circular economy now is, I'm a little bit skeptical because also with materials, to create circulation, we will need a lot of energy because when we use materials, we also degrade all the time the quality.
Mm,
So it's not a total solution just to start circulating materials, because materials change, you get lower qualities and you have to put a lot of energy into these processes to keep the quality up.
mm,
So I think it's a little bit separated. The people who are working with energy and sustainable consumption and circular economy, they are not in some way communicating. They have created their own fields and are happy about that. So, but as you say, the problems are so different in different countries, and this is why I'm very humble when it comes to these cases in China.
mm,
And sometimes I discuss this with people in Sweden, and I say, I think it's a lot of wishful thinking in Sweden, because it's also so that a lot of things we use in Sweden are produced in China. So we have moved a lot of course, emissions to China from us. So
mm,
but it's important to see that it's not the same. But in Sweden, they have the idea that if we create examples, good examples in Sweden, we can learn China. I cannot see this because they are so much focused on their problems, and their problems are so different from the Swedish problems. They have to raise economy and social aspects. This is the situation in many countries, of course, globally, and not at least in the Africa.
mm,
So it's difficult to see really how this development, social and economic development, can go on with in another way than to use more energy and resources. It's I
mm,
cannot really see the solution. Maybe there is no solution. We always think that there is a solution. I'm not sure sometimes that there is a solution on that. Maybe we have to go to a certain level, because it's difficult, of course, with poor people to, they have a different, they are trying to survive every day when it comes to resources. So it's definitely not any general solution to this. But
mm,
in China, I found that we're working with cases on the local level. When we look at a system level of a part of the city. I have also done working with engineers, and they have a tendency to focus very much on engineering solutions.
Mm,
But you have to have more system view when you try to develop these areas, and also to bring people living in the area into the solutions. We can see that, I say, in Sweden. Now it's a backlash in Sweden when it comes to these climate change issues, because we see we cannot we cannot solve it in this way with these short-sighted emission policies we have. And this is also for the EU. We can see that, for example, that EU now have changed the idea that they say that natural gas and nuclear power is sustainable now. And that is, of course, because we see that there will be lack of energy otherwise. When we try to close all the nuclear power station, close the coal power stations, we will not have power enough. And
mm,
this is why they have changed this taxonomy now. So they say that, okay, we say that natural gas and nuclear is also sustainable. So the focus on, for example, nuclear power has changed very much. There have been a much resistance in Sweden towards nuclear power,
mm,
but that has changed. And you know, of course, that now there is also a development of small-scale nuclear power plants,
mm,
which might be also uh, there might be built demonstrations plants also in Sweden quite soon when it comes to small power plants, which will be built in industrial scale.
mm,
So a lot of things are happening, but basically I can see both in China and Sweden that the solution cannot for renewable energy is not only wind and solar energy. This is the same in China. Wind and solar energy is very small part of China energy production. It's mostly still mostly coal.
mm,
So the question is now how can we on a longer transition period reduce the use of coal, especially in China. And I think the big issue is to reduce the use of energy, be more energy efficient.
mm,
And this is for China, this is a huge challenge because they have built so much during the last 20 years, and most of the buildings are very energy inefficient.
mm,
And this, I think, they have also exported these ideas. They are building this kind of infrastructure in Africa and everywhere. And so they are sitting now with a huge infrastructure which is very energy inefficient.
mm,
So this is a big challenge, and I think they should start earlier to try to develop then ideas, especially for high-rise buildings, because in China, high-rise buildings are the central idea to solve the problem with living conditions for people. Uh,
mm, mm.
so that this
Maybe,
is.
yeah. You talk about energy efficiency, isn't it? That we have seen repeatedly, whether it's mobility or general building energy efficiencies. You can increase them, which is good, but if they are met with a significant increase in the overall consumption,
Mm.
then whatever you gained in terms of energy efficiency or technical efficiency for that matter is offset by this overall increase in magnitude. Do you see that happening in China?
Yeah, I mean, incomes are going fast up in China. People get more money. This is why the government is still eligible in China. They give people higher economic standards. So the price for energy is relatively going down. And now in many of the big cities, the apartment sizes in China is bigger than in Sweden. And they want, of course, earlier they had very much variation in temperature in the apartments. Now everyone wants 20 degrees all the year round.
Hmm.
The offset is very, very strong. The rebound effect is extremely strong in China.
Hmm.
And it's difficult to discuss this sustainable consumption because also the young population, I guess it's the same in Africa,
Hmm.
they want a better life.
Yeah.
They are not so interested in these issues. When I take up these issues in my lectures, it's obvious that their focus, the young generation focus, is to get a high material standard.
Hmm.
They are not altruistic. They
Hmm.
are extremely focused on getting a better living condition.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this is why I can sometimes be a little bit irritated for people in Sweden who have very good conditions, saying that, oh, we should consume less and consume less of this and that. But they do, often they don't do it themselves.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we
Yeah.
have focused quite much on trying to see how we can reduce energy consumptions in new high-rise buildings, because this is where a lot of the energy consumption takes place.
Hmm.
In Sweden, it's more focused sometimes on all these sustainability houses in Sweden which are built. It's mostly one family houses, which has a lot of solar cells on the roof and so on. But these examples are not really interesting for a global perspective. It could be for some villages, but high-rise buildings are the one who are the sector that is growing, because it's the only way to solve, because people are moving into cities. You have showed that the urbanization is rate is high, especially in developing countries. I guess
Hmm.
it's the same in Africa.
It is,
Uh,
yeah. So you can see that the highest increase is in Africa, Asia,
mm,
or in North America and Latin America and Europe. It's kind of the increase would be small, like as would be expected. But Ronald, I think if we talk about the way out, for example,
mm,
is it technology or is it political will, or is it the lack of comprehensive holistic approach, because you dissect, you focus on one environmental problem, and you make it that's the only elephant in the room, and you shift problems like you were mentioning. I remember Sweden domestically might not be contributing a lot to climate change, but because of what it imports from China or
mm,
other countries would be a different equation. But globally, we know as well the international agreement is focusing only on domestic, right?
mm. Uh, I think technology, of course, plays an important role, but the consumption part is extremely important. The raising consumption and the rebound effect.
Mm.
Many people said in Sweden that the people started to travel less during this pandemic situation in Sweden.
Mm.
I said directly it will go up again after this pandemic situation,
Mm.
and it will. So
Mm.
we are back to the same situation again. So of course, the consumption, the private consumption is driving everything.
Mm.
Um, and people, there is a discussion sometimes here, we should have another economic system, uh,
Mm.
and measure different things like green development, so on. But at the end, I think everything boils down to individual consumption. We have factories, car manufacturing, and everything that use energy, but at the end, someone is buying every product. So I think in some way, the individual responsibility and the knowledge of individual people is important. But then it's of course difficult to see, because you can see, compare, for example, young people. If you ask young people in Sweden, would you like to live in the future on the countryside or in the cities? Many young people in Sweden say, we would like to have a nice life in the countryside. If I go to my students in China and ask them, where do you want to live in the future? Everyone, 100% say, I want to live in a city because I get better living standard. So in some way, it seems like the, 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 the driving force is still the consumption. And we can do a lot of things to reduce energy use, material use when we produce things. This is happening. We are, for example, in Sweden, we have a lot of development when it comes to building industry to reduce material and energy use in buildings. And this, I think, is something that can be used globally, but still the situation in China and in many developing countries is that they have to build very fast new, for example, high-rise buildings. And we have to find then usable methods to build them more effectively, to use, for example, inertia in the buildings to store energy and so on. I think there are a lot of technical solutions how we can build more effective high-rise buildings and also then use different kind of control systems in the buildings. And I don't think they should be depending on the choice of the consumer. It must be in some way systems that regulate themselves. We have tried all the things that we try to give the inhabitants in Sweden more information, but they don't use less energy because the cost is still too low for it. So of course, this is a dilemma. When the energy cost goes up, then people start to react. But then they will react from a social economic point of view, not from an environmental point of view. This is what's actually happening in Sweden now. The Green Party is out of business because they have tried to raise the cost of energy, fuels for cars and so on. And this has created a situation where people start to protest. But I still think that this discussion about different kind of new economic system, it's not the solution. The solution is still you can make an individual choice yourself what to buy, how to live, and maybe just information and examples, maybe collective examples, which we try to develop also in these Chinese local communities. Try to develop examples where people can live maybe the same life but using less resources and so on. So in this case, we just need to show examples, I think, and demonstration cases and so on.
I think, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
But you can see, of course, also in Africa that the driving force for higher material consumption and living standard is enormous. I saw a list of sustainability index of countries in the world recently, and I think the highest was Costa Rica. But I see that this sustainability index is almost the opposite of wealth. I mean, it's the poor countries that are most sustainable. But this is because they don't. If you give all the people a lot of money in this, they will lose this sustainability immediately. So
yeah, I think that's the issue. Like, how do you bring people which are at the level of unacceptable, low level of consumption? I mean, I don't know if you can use the smart consumption or sustainable consumption, but at the same time, like you were saying, when we compare, for example, 10 years ago, North America, let's say Canada and US versus Northern Europe, like Sweden, the attribution of why people are doing better environmentally there was one aspect was people were better informed, or they are
Mm.
aware, they are
Mm.
educated in that area and so on. But now you are saying that there is going back in terms of people not liking either economic instruments that will push for more
Mm.
responsible consumption, or even the fact that so the Green Party backlash, if I can
Mm.
use that word, is it related to the fact that the other aspects of wind power, solar power versus uh,
Yeah, I think the backlash depends on several things. Partly because the Green Party has put forward very strong this idea that we only have 10 years, then the planet will collapse or more or less. And it's obvious that people have stopped believing in this. This is that has been a strong force for the Green Party, saying, like this Future for Fridays for Future movement with Greta and all this. They say we only have 10 years. But people have got tired of this. They don't believe any longer that the planet will collapse after 10 years. So now people have started to see on other things. They have seen now that gasoline, diesel, all these prices have raised enormously here. And also people are starting to protest everywhere on the exploitation for wind power. They don't like the wind power plants. It's ugly and disturbs nature.
mm,
So it has turned into a situation where people start to protest from a social and economic point of view. They have left the idea more or less that we are in a situation we have to save the planet.
mm, mm. So
Uh,
I think that all shows on the importance of messaging, right? I mean, we know in all scientific publications, I mean, the planet will not collapse in 10 years,
right.
definitely not. But I think the alarmist kind of messaging clearly would be counterproductive in terms of what people can
I
do.
think it's dangerous to be too much. I think it's better to accept this transition will take longer, but it
Mm,
will maybe will create much better life for people. If we can, if people can see that changes in their lives will create for some reason better lives for them.
mm,
And we can have some scenarios, future scenarios where we understand that the transition maybe it takes longer time, but it maybe people start to understand that maybe we can create better lives for that, because we can also see, of course, that we still work 40 hours a week. We have not changed that.
mm,
So still people work a lot to get money to consume more things. And many people have said that we don't get more happy about that. But I don't know. Maybe people get happy about consumption. Many people seems to get happy to consume. But I think information and examples, good examples, how people change their lives to consume less. This must be the best way. I
mm,
don't believe very much in top-down control, and this is another problem I can see now. This is that researchers are getting more and more like activists. They say we must, we should eat this, we should live like that. I don't think it's the researchers' job to tell us how to live. They should give us causal relationships. If we do this, what will happen then? If we eat more vegetables, what will happen actually? The researchers should not tell us how to live. But more and more I can see that researchers get more and more like activists. They tell us how we should do. I don't think there should be anything like I say contradicted. There should be no must or should in the scientific papers. because then people start to lose confidence in research because they think that the researcher are activists themselves. And this is very dangerous when people start to question the researchers because they tell people what they should do. So they should just give evidence-based causal relationship. This is what science is about, actually.
Yeah, true.
Not,
But isn't it also, for example, if you look at who researchers, scientists write for, and who should get the message, right? So you're speaking to the fact that it's at individual level, it's at the consumer level where things can happen, because if there is no demand, there is no supply. I mean, right? So what's demanded, both in terms of the consumable goods and services, but also in terms of the information. So we publish, in peer-reviewed journals, all that. That's how the industry or the business works, right? But then when you talk about this telling, if you do this, this happens, versus if you don't do, something else happens. So isn't it problematic that even that kind of publication are away, both in terms of the semantics, the language, but also in terms of access to from the public?
I don't think it has to be so, but this is a problem because the career mechanism at the university is just to write high-level papers, which are read by other researchers. So we don't get actually the knowledge out. This is a problem. There is too little communication between the community, people, and the researchers. Researchers are producing things only for other researchers. And all this impact factor means that you're trying to cite other friends.
Yeah, trying to impress your friends. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is a basic problem, but I still think that researchers should avoid too much activism because I can see already that people tend to lose confidence in researchers when they are activists. They say you shouldn't drive a car. They should tell me what happens if the price on fuel goes up. How will that affect social, environmental, and economic aspects of the society? What can we do? And then, of course, we have a democracy. So politicians should, in some way, create scenarios. We think we should go in this direction, and then people can vote what they want. There is no other way, I think, in a democracy. China is another situation. They do top down all the time. And this works as long as people get better conditions.
How do you see? Because in the 60s, there was, the issue of pesticides like DDT, all that, and so on. So it all started with Carson publishing that book, and so on. But then I think activism led into some banning and so on, right? Even with the same, maybe the Montreal Protocol, phasing out of ozone depleting gas, all that. So is it about balance between, the scientific content, the knowledge, versus activism?
But I think this is, of course, generally in risk perception that if a problem comes close to a person or your children, then you react. For example, dangerous chemicals, you can feel they will affect my health and they will affect my children's health. So this is easier, and there is no actual cost in that, in reducing that problem. But when it comes to energy, if you try to change the energy situation like we are doing in Europe, then there is a cost. The prices of energy is going up. We will have power problems all the time because we cannot produce enough power for every situation, especially now when everyone should go over to electric cars and industry should produce using electricity. And electricity is not the primary energy source, even if people think it is, it's still produced somewhere. And then we have another problem. We have this fast effect on your private economy. And this is, of course, what some researchers say. It should cost more because then we change. Yes, we might change, but in a democracy, we might also say that we don't accept this. We choose another party which say that we should not have so high taxes on fuels for cars. This is a discussion in Sweden. Some parties say we should lower the tax on gas for cars because people can't afford otherwise to drive. So we have to find some way. But I think you have a point there that the communication between research and the public is poor. We are very isolated. Researchers are knowledge isolated in communities. I think we should have more of discussions. Which way can we go, and how will that affect? How will it affect our lives, and so on? Can we get a better living through other ways of developing the country? I think still the knowledge is in many sectors, especially politicians, are very low. And among people also, there are people who think still that electricity is the solution for energy. They don't even know that electricity is some way it's produced from other resources. So I think we should have much more communication, also researchers communication, but I think still researchers should avoid to tell people what they should do and not do, because then people will back out. So information, I think, is very good. There is only one way that people will, if we don't want to go through a Chinese way and tell people all the time this and that happens, we have to go through a situation with awakening, that people learn and learn more. It's the same if you have children. So the only way to raise children is to trying to get them more educated and trying to get them to understand things more, not just to tell them do that. That will not help, or you will get a child you are not happy with after that. So I think communication with researchers and public will be important, and then different kind of showcases. I say that all the time, demonstration cases, which maybe leads to better lives for people, not only higher consumption. But I don't think you need a new economic system, because with more information, people can choose themselves. And it has to come from people's choice in a democratic place. It has to come from inside in some way to get a change. I think that is important.
Maybe I think you repeatedly mentioned about the need for showcasing or demonstration, all that and so on. So maybe one question that comes to mind, I mean, from a North American perspective, we see, for example, at least in some areas, Northern Europe is doing it right or better. I mean, it could be the better term. But do you see anywhere, it could be small scale or even larger than small scale, but do you see where things are going at least in the right track, in the right direction in terms of?
I think there are a lot of examples. In Sweden, they are trying to build a new kind of areas where people live closest, where they share things. We have collective food restaurants in the area and so on. There are a lot of things here in Sweden that is actually happening when they try to plan areas for more sustainable living, which is based on actually that people feel we have a better life here. We don't have to spend so much money for things. So I think there are many practical examples growing now. I can see them in Sweden. I don't see very much in China, but in Sweden I can see a lot of tests now with new types of areas, buildings, and so on.
Are you specifically talking about Hamar Vishostad and the
No,
Royal
not.
Court?
I don't
Oh,
think that is a good example. There are other examples where they try to build different kind of collective houses and areas. Hammarby Sjöstad is not a good example, I think.
what
This is
about the Royal Seaport?
a
The,
royalty, but it's the same. I think this is high-end middle class areas. They have not changed. They are good, very good isolated houses and so on, but they don't have any effect of the living of people, these areas. They are very expensive apartments in good located areas.
hmm,
So I don't think these areas are any good examples. I think there are many other smaller scales which have some kind of maybe starting point for building the cities in another way. But we could do that in Sweden because we have a situation which is very different from China. They have to build apartments for millions and millions people coming
hmm,
from the countryside.
hmm,
And then, of course, they have understood there also that maybe we should not put so much focus on urbanization to get everyone into the cities. They
hmm,
should also try to develop smaller cities, but still they think that the old countryside living is very difficult to maintain with services and so on. So in some way, to raise the living standards in developing countries, I think we have to develop also smaller cities where they have all these services and so on.
hmm.
But
Yeah, I think we covered, the issue of political will and technology or technical
mm,
efficiencies, all that. But also a very important factor is the individual consumers, choice, right? So, and maybe we can wrap up by bit mentioning what does it take for these small scale good examples of apartment or collective house development in Sweden. What does it take for them to be large scale or replicated elsewhere, including China? I mean, the China case, like you said, speed, urgency, all that is, I think, a factor there. I
mm,
was reading the other day the UNEP report called, I think it's from 2018, The Weight of Cities. It's focusing on resource
mm,
efficiency. So the global, resource consumption per capita per year is at least double what they consider is a sustainable rate. So I
mm,
think China is one of where you get this a lot of resource consumption. So I mean, even internationally moving resources from elsewhere, right? So
mm.
what do you think should be done, or where is the entry point, a good entry point to change and multiply these good examples? I was reading your post on the small step tyranny. Uh,
Yeah.
I think you can maybe connect to that as well.
Yeah, the small step tyranny is, of course, that every step you take, you think it's going in the right direction. When you look at all the steps together, they are going in the right. Someone said about China to me here, a leading activist here said that China is the only country in the world that can be sustainable because they can decide top down. And then I said, yeah, that is very good. If they are going in the right direction, what happens if they are going in the wrong direction? Then it's a disaster. So I think that it's very difficult to have a general solution for all countries. But here we can see a tendency that people maybe are moving out from the cities because it's too expensive. They want to have another type of life, especially when they have children. Then they are trying to build new types of villages, which are more socially coherent and where people can meet, and where they have different kind of possibilities to use this sharing and all these things. But this is I don't think maybe it's scalable, but all the ideas I think are exchanged here in Sweden. So I think more and more these types of areas, which is not central urban areas, even if it happens sometimes there, is developing with new ideas. But I think maybe the solutions must be different in different countries. China tried for some times to import this Hammarby Sjöstad to China. This was a disaster, because I can talk for hours why it was a disaster, but you have to find your own local solutions. But in some way, I think finding ways to develop urban areas where people maybe find that they have a better life with using less resources. There are many cases where we can do that and to demonstrate it. But I think we have some areas in Sweden, but in China still we can do it maybe in some areas, but they are in another state, I would say, of development. We have reached a certain level where people maybe start to think we have everything. Every Christmas, people ask me, and my family asks me, "What do you want for Christmas?" I don't want. I have everything.
Hmm.
So maybe we come to that sooner or later. We say we have everything. So maybe other things should count more, and that has been said many times. But still, I think it has to be local and it has to come from people inside. It's people, individual people that consume. It's very difficult to have some top-down strategy here.
Mm, mm. I think it also boils down to what you were saying before, that how knowledge is created and how
Mm.
knowledge is communicated both to the industry and to the politicians, but also more importantly to the public, and how that is processed. So what are the incentives? People need incentives in some cases, right? And the willingness to pay or the willingness to purchase is also part of that parameter.
Yeah,
Um,
and then you have to create in some way scenarios which make people enthusiastic for the future. And
mm,
this 10 years planet death is a disaster. It will not be good to have these alarm. We should create transition scenarios which people think this is good for me.
mm,
We know that negative motivation is always bad.
mm,
If it's better to have positive uh, scenarios, I think we can do it. We can do it if we do this, but it should be also realistic. I think a lot of the energy strategies in Sweden is wishful thinking, and also in Europe. China has understood that. They are building more coal power now. They are expanding coal power. The next 30 years, will have more coal power because they understand that their strategy to raise economy and social you need energy. And the problem here with this alarmistic propaganda we have here is that we will run into a situation where we have a lot of problems with energy. We should have more long-term strategy for transitions. We have to phase out fossil fuels, but I think it will take longer time. We have to create, in some way, scenarios which people believe in and which they think this will give everyone a better life, I think.
mm,
That will change maybe people's motivation.
mm. I
So
think
even if I'm a Swedish person, I don't think that Greta is very positive for our development,
mm,
actually.
I think one issue is the whether it's buildings like we are seeing here. So we need to build. I mean, in terms of the demand, we need to build the whole New York City, an equivalent of that every month for the next 40 years. So there is a big demand to expand on that, but we also have to maintain, repurpose, or renovate the existing building stock.
Mm.
And the power plants that you are mentioning about coal power plant and others, they are not built also for 5 years. You know, they need the
Yeah,
significant
yeah.
lifetime. So I think that question of do we really have time? I mean, yes, the world will not collapse in 10 years, but we are also at the same time seeing, whether it's in northern Canada or elsewhere, we are seeing the natural system, the climate has
Mm.
affected already and will continue to do so. So I think it all is about structural thinking, but like you said, showcasing what's possible
Mm.
without, it shouldn't be an either or. It shouldn't be either the environment or social development. I mean, for me, for the last, let's say, 13 months, I mean, outside my day job, all my time is advocating for my mom, for my sister, in
Yeah,
Tigray.
yeah, yeah, I know
There
that.
is a genocidal war.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, uh, this reality through my life
Uh,
shows me, you can multiply that for many millions of people elsewhere, right? Uh,
yeah.
so
I
that
think we have to understand that. I mean, the people in Tigray have other problems than climate change.
exactly, exactly. I mean,
You have
just
to understand
survival,
that.
now, here and now, right?
Mm.
So I enjoy that.
We were talking about building new. I think there is a movement now in Sweden also when they discuss, do we have to build so much more? Can't we
Mm,
have a philosophy trying to use what we have more?
mm,
There are, of course, strong economic incitaments for building new buildings. People make money out of it. But
mm.
maybe there will be a movement towards trying to use what we have. But
It makes sense in developed countries, right?
yeah,
So maybe what we need is the bottom one where we have, new homes, in developing countries, because it's still, shelter is a problem. But like you said, the building stock in OECD countries
mm,
is something that we might need to repurpose, or, and so on. Otherwise, maybe not build new.
mm. Uh, but as I say, sometimes we have a discussion about what is creating poverty and what is raising poverty. Of course, we know that one of the most important factor is conflicts,
Mm,
everywhere conflicts. And I think the driver for conflicts might not, people say it's climate change, but I don't think climate change is the main driver for
mm.
conflicts. It's other things.
I mean,
So,
there has been a number of, actually, the willingness to, or if I say this word, some of the conflicts are designed,
mm,
constructed for one reason or another.
uh,
So there are areas where climate change is really eating up our resources, and people in competing for resources create conflicts. But yeah.
yeah, I think because my idea is that there is a lot of focus on criticizing the fossil industry, but it's less focus on the weapon industry. All
Mm,
these countries that produce like so much weapons that are fed into these conflicts. I think that should be also a focus.
yeah, very true. I mean,
Yeah,
we are a living example how these modern weapons like drones and so on are being effectively, I
yeah,
mean, used to massacre people.
yeah.
So this is, like you said, whereas the advocacy, activism, also is on a different part.
Mm.
Ronald, final word before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think there is hope, but I think we should be more realistic, maybe. And we should have faith in people once they get information. and they can change their own life. I think that is the most strong way to change. When they see that there is another way to live and another way to develop your own life, I think that's the only strong force in, especially in democratic countries.
Mm.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you
Mm.
so much for your time. And as we see examples from demonstration sites, all that, or something that we feel worth discussing, I really hope
Yeah.
you will be back again, and we will continue our discussion.
Yeah, it would be very nice to meet you again. Get that. I think you had made a fantastic travels when you a good job. I really admire your work actually. So I'm trying to find these cases here and collect these cases in Sweden because I also want to see if we can use something in China from this.
That would be great.
Uh,
Actually, I think maybe when we meet again, we can talk about these cases and how that is possible or impossible, to multiply them, let's say in North America. What does it take,
yeah,
to take them? And so I will
it's
be happy to work on
definitely
that.
definitely
Great.
very interesting.
Have a good night from here,
Yeah,
and
it's
thank you so
It's
much.
9 o'clock now in the evening. What's
Yeah,
the
so
time? What's your time now?
here it's
Okay.
1 p.m.
I
in the afternoon.
sometimes we have seminars between North America, Europe, and China. It's extremely difficult to find time here.
I
It's
know.
good for China because China, you can tell them we have a meeting in the night, and they will go up in the night. But here, no one will go up in the night for a
Yeah, that's
seminar.
that's that's the thing. On Monday now, tomorrow, I have a meeting, the ISO standard for
Yeah,
circular economy coordination. I have a meeting, so I think, the most west. So I have to wake up, I think, at 5 or 6.
yeah,
But there is another one in Japan in the committee who would be almost sleeping.
yeah.
So it's different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Getachew. It was interesting to discuss with you. We have many ideas.
Thank you. We will
Thank you.
continue. Okay. Have a
Good
good one.
initiative. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
You have been following the first episode of Sustainability Insights, Urban Sustainability and Energy with Professor Ronald Wennersten, a Swedish professor actively working in China, starting with theoretical physics and chemical engineering, but now actively working in School of Architecture in China in 2 universities, I must say. He was my boss, my colleague, my mentor over the past 15 to 20 years. And it was my pleasure to have him back here to converse on urban sustainability and energy. We covered the social, the economic, and the environmental, and emphasizing the fact that there is a need for demonstration, cases, showcasing, and learning by doing role in all these transitions that are needed. Then you have been live following us on YouTube and Facebook. Please share, subscribe. We will come back with another edition of Sustainability Insights, a new show that started today. Bye from here.